I'll just go for it. So, welcome everyone who's here and anybody who's also on the live stream to our third and final day of our symposium. And this morning we're joined by the lovely Toby and Torran, who are going to be presenting their current works in our third portfolio presentations. And then just a nod to what is happening in the rest of the day. This will be followed at 12 by our final portfolio presentation where we'll be joined by Shona and Alistair. And then this afternoon we'll have 2 guest lectures, one from Clara on NFTs, which is really exciting. And finally, Jen Southam to close our symposium. So I'll just do a small introduction to what you two are going to talk about today and your works, very brief, and then I'll hand over to Toby. But I mean, this portfolio presentation from my perspective is a lot more about that personal experience of the land around us and our earth from very different perspectives. Torran is working with archive, with family, with friends, and kind of merging like the past and the present as well, and mixing time and kind of the experience of the land around us. Whereas Toby is much more of a personal kind of experience of the land that you'll also see him talk about, that is rooted in his childhood and his lifestyle. So yeah, Toby, take the floor.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I suppose I should probably do the my introduction thing first, or should I go straight into the photos? I don't know.
Straight for wherever you fancy.
I don't know where I've put the I don't know where I've put my introduction now. Oh, I'll just go straight into the pictures. And I think basically what's important for me is that I don't properly over explain the pictures or really explain them at all until after I've shown them, if that makes sense.
Sure.
So I'll do that. I'll stop talking about it and actually do it. How do I do this? Oh, for goodness sake.
I see myself, that's a bit scary.
There we go. Right. So I'll just flick through the pictures. You have a look at them, and then at the end I think we just have a little discussion and talk about what they're about.
Yeah, maybe talk about your title, if you can just introduce it a little bit. But yeah.
Yeah. So the title comes from a book that I read ages ago, and that I've reread quite a few times now because I think it's really good. It's called The Little Snake, and it's basically, well, it's about a little snake, but the title comes from a passage that I thought was really beautiful, to be honest, about pretty much imagination and this little girl who's got a really small garden. So in order to make the garden bigger, she takes really tiny paces in the garden so that she can imagine that it's just this great expanse, because it takes her so long to get from one side of the garden to the other. So I think that it ties in a little bit, but I don't know. I think that the title's not. I find it quite difficult. I thought it was a beautiful bit of literature, basically. So I tied it into there. Yeah, that's it. Right, I'll go through the pictures if I can, if it lets me.
Thinking about it.
So I guess I could contextualize briefly.
Yeah, sure.
I've grown up on a farm and I've always lived there, and that's where I've always lived. And as I've grown up, I've kind of become quite distant from the farm and from the farming lifestyle and all of that, all of the stuff that comes with farming that you don't really normally see. So this is kind of an exploration of that distance and how I don't feel like I really fit in with it anymore, personally. And it's quite a personal thing, but I think that now I've discussed it with lots of other people, it's also, there are themes of how we as a society don't really fit in with the land around us as well. But yeah, we can talk about that more later. But yeah, I think the kind of awkwardness of it and me not fitting into certain spaces or being a bit out of place, I think, is the main kind of thing for me, really.
Mm.
Cool. There we go.
Yeah, so I guess we can just sort of begin our conversation. It'd be nice if we could sort of keep the photographs up there, and so we can keep referring throughout our conversation about it. But yeah, I think it'd just be nice to hear a little bit more about how you feel about that separation from the land, from like that personal point of view with farming and that lifestyle and what you've grown up with. And then also, I guess, as kind of as humanity and our species and that separation there.
Yeah, personally, it's like at some point in most people's lives, they're going to move away from home, and I don't know, it's probably quite a big thing for everyone, really. But for me, because I've not just grown up in a house, but I've grown up in like a landscape kind of thing. Sounds a bit cringy, but my home is the farm and everything that is in it. So leaving that would mean leaving everything that I'm standing in and all of the things that I've seen and known growing up and everything that I'm used to. So it's quite a big thing for me, really. But at the same time, as I've said, I still don't feel like I really kind of click or fit in with where I am, which is why I'm doing photography and not farming. But yeah, there's still this weird connection there, and I think that it's you could in a way relate it to the way to I think what Miles was talking about yesterday, where we were saying stuff about how we don't really kind of connect to our land very much anymore, and we're quite in our surroundings, we're quite distant from it as a not society, but as a people, I guess.
Yeah, definitely as a species, really, isn't it?
But I think, like, at its core, that's what farming is. It's a connection to the land. But then even farming as a job has become separated. You know, you're in your big tractor, you're high up off the ground, or you're in a grain store, or you're in an office, and you're not doing all the stuff that you used to. Not to say that doesn't happen anymore, but it's not quite as prevalent as it once used to be, and I think that's quite sad, really, that we've become so far away and separated and again distant. It keeps coming back to that, from the land that feeds us, I guess.
Yeah, and even though obviously we see you pictured in the land, which obviously we can talk about in more depth, there is that sense of distance, I guess, distance from you growing, and it's a sort of like your journey away from, you know, your childhood home and into your kind of building your own life and so on. But also, I guess, that distance between you and the land as well, and that distance between farming and the land. And it'd be cool if you could talk a little bit more about what the specifics of that might be and how that is reflected in the work as well.
What do you mean? Sorry.
I just mean like farming and the land, and how, you know, you talk about the land that feeds us, and yeah, that we're sort of really disconnected from that. And even you're sort of touching upon that with farming itself, there's still that sense of disconnect as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I think we get further and further away every year, you know, with more technology and more gadgets and gizmos and stuff, and bigger tractors and faster cars, and just like everything has to become more and more efficient, and everything has to work quicker and grow quicker and all of that. So there's like a distance then again from how natural things work, where everything has to take time, and it takes as much time as it takes and you can't rush it, whereas the human mindset is that everything has to be now, and it has to be quick, and it has to happen, and we have to have it, and we have to have as much as we can, and if we can't have as much as we can, then you're not doing good enough, you have to work harder. Maybe that's not a human thing, maybe that's a capitalist thing, but you know, it happens pretty much everywhere in every farming.
I mean, it's a growing impatience, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And then I think trying to say that it's okay, trying to justify it with saying that it's necessary, and using necessity as like an excuse to overuse everything. And that links back to what Miles was saying yesterday with the mining in Dubai, where there's like a slight cognitive distance there, where you're like, we know that we shouldn't be doing this, but it's okay because we have to. But really, we don't have to, but we still have to, because there are so many mouths to feed, and there are all these excuses that you can use to like justify what we're doing. And I feel a bit kind of iffy, I guess, when it comes to when it comes to trying to make excuses for doing stuff like that. Keep flicking through.
Yeah, and I think also it'd be nice to sort of return at this moment to the title, Tiny Paces. And for me, like the vision I have in my mind and the visuals that title takes me to as well is this navigation of land. And as you said, like making a place feel larger, and you can almost imagine you out in these spaces, in this landscape, kind of navigating it and walking through it in small paces, and obviously that part of process of shooting as well. I think the visual language there is really quite beautiful, but there's a sincerity there as well to the land, even though there's distance, I think, too.
Yeah, I think that having like the deadpan, straight expression in pretty much all the pictures, apart from somewhere I'm like in puddles and I've got to hold my boots, that helps with that as well. And that helps, I think, create a distance, because if I'm not involved, and it's this weird thing going on where I'm in the land, but I'm not really in it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I'm not involved with it. I'm standing on something, but I'm not doing anything with it. I'm just standing there taking a picture of myself.
Yeah, and you're somehow still removed, as you say, although you're within the land and within the landscape, and you're positioned at the core of it, really. You're still somehow not quite there.
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of a direct parallel, I think, to what modern day farming is, or what I've seen for modern day farming to be. I'm not shitting on farming. I don't want to do that. Sorry for my language, but I'm not attacking farming. I don't want to do that. It just doesn't feel right at the moment for me, and I don't like what it's becoming. I think that's quite a like mainstream opinions I have, I think, at the moment, that farming's bad and farming's bad and farming's bad. But I don't think it's bad. I just think that it's quite apathetic, and the emotion that there used to be, I think, in like when farming was having its boom, I guess, it's going away, and it's less about trying to make the best product and more about trying to make as much product as you can, which I think is a bit.
Yeah, and I guess it's kind of like that human life and that human experience of the world around us, as well as obviously seeping into and affecting that industry and that lifestyle as well. Like I know we spoke about when we met over a week ago now, I think, that like, you know, farming was more integral to a community. But if you had your local farmer and you go down, they know everyone, you're providing for a community. but now I guess there's that disconnection of community everywhere as well.
Yeah.
And that's sort of seeping into an industry, into sort of species as well.
Yeah. I mean, that's when it's like, isn't that? That's what it's pretty much when we became humans, is when we started farming, wasn't it? I think that's how it goes. I don't know.
Yeah, I think the first settlements were all sort of based around farming.
When we started learning how to use the land. But still at that point, it was like a symbiotic relationship where we give, and then we take, and then we give back, and then we take again, and it was kind of always in a circle. But now I think it's much more take than it is give, and it's trying to see how much we can take away before we have to give back.
Yes.
And I think that's applicable to a lot of things when it comes to people. And the natural world, just seeing how much we can take away before stuff starts to collapse, and then we're like, oh no, we should probably give back, shouldn't we? And then it all falls apart.
Well, yeah, indeed. And I think it'd be nice to also hear a little bit more about like the process of making these photographs and kind of what that experience was for you personally, and kind of just how you sort of made these images and how they sort of came about as well.
I did a project before last year, the start of lockdown, where I was taking pictures of myself, taking a minute from all of the mad stuff going on in my room and the news and stuff. And I really enjoyed that because I could go off with a camera and just take pictures of myself, and it was quite meditative, I guess. And so I returned to it because I was at home when I was taking those pictures, and I was at home when I was taking these. I kind of naturally came back to taking pictures of myself. It's a bit of a weird thing to say, but yeah, returning to that, it's quite difficult to say it without saying it's just really nice. Do you know what I mean? Like just going out with a camera and setting it up, finding how you want to compose a shot, and then walking into the frame, waiting for it to take the pictures, because I have it on like a timed release or whatever it's called, coming back and making sure they're okay, and then carrying on the walk. But most of them, I just go off on a walk and see what I can find. I don't really think of anything before I go out. Composed when it comes to taking pictures. I just go out and see what I find, basically.
Yeah, it's interesting that it's kind of like walking through the landscape and this kind of quite calm and serene sort of experience. And then I guess also like walking within that landscape, that kind of, even what you're touching upon there feels quite in tune with the land. And then we're left with these photographs that obviously they're beautiful and they're of the land and they're within the land, but yet we've said there's still that distance. So it's interesting sort of how when you walk in front of the camera, maybe it's like perhaps that performance for the camera, or it's just that kind of emotion sort of seeping out on how you feel about the space as well.
I think it's weird what happens when you put someone into a picture, especially when you put yourself into it. If I didn't have me in this, I think it'd still be an okay picture, but it wouldn't be particularly interesting. I mean, someone who'd never seen this kind of stuff before might find it interesting, but obviously it ties all the pictures together, doesn't it? Having me in there, so there's that. But also, yeah, I don't know, being a part of the image definitely changes it a lot, and it's quite a difficult thing to explain, really, because I don't know, it's just something it just does, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I guess because like this is sort of the land of your childhood and the land that's like within your memories. Like, I guess there's that sense of belonging, isn't there? That this land belongs to you and your family, more so because obviously you work the land and it's all centered in your lifestyle and your family, isn't it? So, and I just kind of like this idea that it's like the land of childhood and it belongs to our minds, it belongs to our memories, and it belongs to us. And so it feels right to have you there. And as you say, yeah, it doesn't feel right to not have you within that landscape as well, because in a way you kind of become a part of that landscape, although you're distanced from it, which is very
definitely. No, I think you do. I think, and wherever you've grown up, wherever your childhood home was, it's not just the house that is your home, really, is it's everything that comes with it. It's all the land around it, and like you go home and all of the places you used to play, you know them like the back of your hand and all of that stuff. Like with me, it's quite a big area. You know, I was quite lucky, but I still know it. Like I don't even have to think about where I'm going. If I'm going somewhere, I just go there, which is quite nice. So yeah, I suppose I am part of it in a way. Yeah, I think this is what I like so much about photography, is that I didn't say much coming into this, but for me, the most important thing is the discussion and talking about what it means to other people afterwards. So that's a bit kind of cliche, but it's just as important for me for other people to get stuff out of my work as it is for me to put stuff in, if that makes any sense at all.
Yeah, no, it does. And like, obviously, there's so much about this that is so personal to you and so specific to you, and we can all see that, and at times we can all feel that. But we're also touching upon like that context that surrounds it and that relationship with the land. And I think one of the main things that also the chat is popping off about it, literally, is there's that sense of comedy in it. And I will just I'll take some people's comments. But like Emma said, like it's like weirdly giving you that kind of Where's Wally kind of vibe, where you're searching for you're like, where are you in the landscape? Or it's like you presenting these pictures and saying, you know, I'm here and you have to find me. And again, there's that sense of navigation in the landscape that we have to like discover where you are. And I think that comedy, although it's not like funny in a way, it's just that sense of something relatable as well, and it reminds us of that. It brings us closer to the land ultimately, I think.
Yeah, I think, yeah, it's like, it's one of those things that I didn't really expect to come out of it, any kind of humor at all. And then I showed it to people, and it's no one was laughing, but you know, it's either like a smile or a chuckle or something's good enough for me. But yeah, that's really important because it shows a connection straight away. If you're laughing, I mean, there's some kind of emotional thing going on there. Whatever it is, it's like you have a connection. You see something funny in it, and then you want to look more, and you want to find me again and again. And you want to keep on looking, which I think is good. I like it. I think it's funny that people find it funny. Obviously, this one's supposed to be funny. But actually, when I first took it, I don't think I was trying to be funny. I think I was just thinking what it'd be like if I stood on top of the tractor and what it looked like. And then I took it and thought, yeah, that's a bit funny, I guess.
Yeah, and I guess especially for people like, I mean, I'm sure the majority of people here have never experienced that lifestyle and that experience of farming. I haven't at all. And so yeah, from our perspective, it's that kind of relationship. I can think that's quite funny, like the idea of someone standing on top of a tractor, because your perception of those things is like, surely that's not right. Or there's part like in the picture you just showed where you can't see your head and you're just slightly above the sort of frame of the door, and there's like where you're sort of merging into space again. There's definitely that sense of comedy. It's not like laugh out loud funny. It's just a sort of, oh, that's. It's just a little bit humorous, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think maybe it's quite a British thing. I don't know if it happens anywhere else, but like like laugh through the pain in a way. So if you've got a problem, you make a joke about it, and then you laugh at it and you carry on. And dealing with big issues by laughing at them, I think, can bring more attention to them, or can help you get over it. I know it helps me get over stuff, just laughing and moving on. But yeah, I'm not trying to say by that I'm trying to tackle this big issue of me moving out of my childhood home, but I don't know. Am I? I'm still trying to figure out what the project really means to me. That's the thing. I've only been doing it for about 5 weeks, so it's still everything's changing still in my head, and I'm still whenever anyone says something, I'm like, oh yeah, and then I go and explore that a bit more, or you know. So I'm still weaving and kind of snaking my way around what's going on.
I guess in a way it is kind of that, like, I mean, this sounds cliche, but that kind of coming of age kind of journey into sort of your adult life and into sort of, yeah, you've got kind of your future in a way. And I guess there is that strong element of that. But I think it's nice to have that. It constantly brings us back to that personal and emotional relationship to the land. And obviously when you're thinking about the things outside of that, that sort of the digital drives us further from our physical existence, let alone the land. It's really nice to have that nice route literally back to yourself and back to that landscape that is surrounding you and that you're constantly finding you within. But yeah, there's also that kind of juxtaposition of, you know, because the self is there, because you are in the photographs, there's kind of that subtle reminder or that subtle indication in a way, at least for me, that like humanity is looking quite inward. And you've already said that, you know, it's all about what we can gain from things and gain from the land. And there's less of that kind of emotion with the landscape as well. And I guess that kind of encourages that distance too.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm thinking about it. Yeah, I'm not directly emotional in the pictures, am I? I'm not like bawling my eyes out. Just completely deadpan. And I think that's, well, it not only does it help with the humorous-ish nature of it, but it helps also with its a kind of accessibility where you could almost put yourself in my shoes if you wanted to. And especially with stuff like this where I'm far away and you can't really see me. It could be anyone. I don't know. Yeah. So there's like, it's trying to relate it to lots of people whilst also relating it to myself. I think what's tricky about this is that there's a lot of different contexts going on, which is good. It's kind of like a blessing and a curse, really, because once I start talking about one thing, I'll suddenly start talking about another, and then I'll go on to something else, and then I'll just lose track of my head and I'll just go off on something.
Yeah, it sort of all moves and like kind of sways between lots of different contexts and meanings. And I also think like that kind of deadpan pose and that, you know, sort of deadpan expression, and maybe you could sort of go into that a little bit more. That is a part of that humor, isn't it? Because we're all kind of expecting you to sort of show that emotion in the land, and then you don't, and then we're like, what do we do? Like,
yeah,
I'm not sure what to feel, and it's that kind of relief of humor, I suppose, as well.
I think that's a good thing, though. I don't mind when people don't know what to think. I think that's probably a good thing. I don't want to tell you what to think, I think is the biggest thing. Like, I just give you my context and then you can go off and think about what you want to think about. But yeah, the deadpan, I'm just very good at being deadpan, I think is probably the thing. I'm very good at just being completely like dead behind the eyes kind of thing. So it comes like very naturally to just stand there and not think about anything really, and just straight into the camera and wait for the shutter to release. This is the thing. It's like a lot of this stuff is hindsight, I guess. But yeah, I think just me being there and the uniformity of all the pictures as well. So I've got the same hat, same overalls, same expression. Helps tie it all together.
Yeah, I guess a lot of it seems like quite a subconscious thing, that sort of importance and significance of those things. Like, is it feels right at the time, and then you sort of look back at it, and then you're like, yeah, it works really well. It's just interesting, that sort of repetition as well throughout the photographs, even though you're kind of, all the pictures are sort of in different landscapes and they're all quite different to each other. There is again that anchor point of view and the way you present yourself and the way you're dressed and your sort of facial expressions and so on. Yeah. Okay, I think we have a few questions, but I think Isaiah's here, and Isaiah, would you like to ask any questions? And then if anyone else has any questions for Toby on this meeting or on Instagram, let us know and we'll ask them for Toby.
Yeah, not really, but like I think including yourself in like the landscape is, I mean, it automatically like kind of like evokes some sort of like performative quality. in the photographs as well. And yeah, I think I agree with you, Toby, that including yourself makes a whole difference, because because right now I feel compelled to kind of like compare or look at the difference between you and the landscape and kind of like consider all these things together as well. So
yeah, I think, and like initially the idea for the project was to literally use myself as a measuring stick. So it wasn't, I wasn't there to be pretty, which I don't think would happen anyway. But I think I wasn't there to like look good or to perform for the camera. It's literally just so that you could tell how big I was and how big the landscape is around me. So that's where the whole uniform and the deadpan stuff came from. But then I think it's, as we were talking about just then, in hindsight, it's become something else as well as that, which is interesting in itself. But yeah, I think using me to just literally show you
yardstick.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I don't know, some of these photos like they kind of like evoke some sort of like romantic understanding of the landscape as well, isn't it? Where the human figures are usually really small and the landscapes are like huge.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, your typical like Turner, Friedrich, and so on and so forth. But in an industrial landscape, so this is everything they hated. So
Exactly.
Yeah. There's that kind of stark juxtaposition, as you say, that I was going to sort of mention, that kind of very innately English kind of view of the landscape. I mean, as we mentioned yesterday, and my absolute love, William Blake, that sort of green and pleasant lands, but then, as you say, is juxtaposed by everything that those people hated, and the industrialized working of the land as well. So you've got that kind of immeasurable thing going on as we sort of move closer into like the modern age and the information era I think we're currently in. But there's that very beautiful sense of that Englishness.
Yeah, there is.
Yeah.
There's this whole idea of like navigation and exploration as well. As well, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think about Isaiah, we talked about I think it's your experiences of coming to England and having this whole, the way that the UK was represented and then the way it is when you get here. Like it's like represented like this, like beautiful, well, apart from the pylons, but like everything's green and there's luscious trees and it's all beautiful, and then you get here and it's more like this, and there's industrial landscapes, there's crisp packets everywhere, and
seagulls everywhere.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I think that's interesting as well. It's another context that you could bring into it. So how things are like the English countryside is represented as this beautiful place that has such luscious history. And it's not
the idyllic countryside.
Exactly. But where most people live, it's nothing like that. It still exists, but you have to look for it. And I think that's, again, I don't want to be like rose-tinted glasses about it. I don't think it's not like desperately sad that it's become that, but it is a bit, it's a bit like, oh well, it's not like that anymore. It's something completely different. It's like this, there's silos everywhere, and there's massive fields full of wheat and barley, and
it's interesting to think of the way that we also present the land around us, and it's that holding on to that beauty of the land around us, that Turner, Gainsborough, and there's so many of those beautiful painters painting the landscape, and yet I guess also like that kind of, like you were talking about, that big expanse of landscape that you're in, and then there's pylons in the background, and while there's that kind of like invasion of something industrial and that human invasion, it's also what's kind of really nice about the landscape and the country surrounding us, that actually, like, while it is a bit shit, it's also like there's that kind of still that beauty and that human English kind of town-like cityscape as well, if you're kind of following my drift.
Yeah. I love the pylons. I think it might be the only one that does. I think they're beautiful. I don't know why. I think that it's quite even here, like the way that they're juxtaposed with the trees and the natural forms are all very erratic, and like it's all about entropy and basically starting from one place and then just spreading out, whereas a very human form in the background that's it's serving its purpose. It has to be straight. It has to stand upright for as long as it possibly can, and that's it. And I think that's quite interesting. But yeah, because I've grown up with them, I think that they're really nice. But I think if you'd grown up in a place where they weren't there and then they were introduced, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, and I guess it's also like the entire landscape of it, almost the entire photograph that we see is also quite impermanent. That ethereal, ephemeral quality around it, and then, as you say, this pylon in the background becomes this quite permanent thing that, you know, no matter if humanity sort of leaves this world and sort of dies in like climate change and so on, I'm sure those pylons will still be going strong.
Well, exactly, yeah. I think if I went back to the exact same pace, it would be the only thing in the picture that wouldn't have changed if I'm looking around. Yeah. So that puddle's not there anymore. All the green is about like 6 inches tall. Everything's changed. Everything's completely different. So yeah, that's another interesting thing to talk about if you wanted to. But yeah, there you go.
Yeah, that sort of permanence of things that are made as well. There's that impermanence of the sort of living and our existence in this world, and again that sort of fragility of life, isn't it?
Yeah.
But yeah, does anyone else have any questions?
Yeah, I think Miles has a question on Instagram. He just says, would you say that sense of humor comes from a slight awkwardness you might feel in the period of moving away from a farming lifestyle and towards the arts? ?
Good question. Yeah, probably. Yeah, I think, there's definitely awkwardness there. I'm quite an awkward person as it is. So I think moving from farming into photography, which I probably like about as polar opposite as you could get, and moving away from like a farming family into something that isn't farming is odd, and trying to navigate that in itself is quite awkward, I think. I am supported by my family. I'm not saying I'm not, but I mean, it still feels kind of weird to do that, and not to carry on the family farm, and not to do, I guess, what people think I should do, I suppose. But yeah, there's definitely awkwardness there. So dealing with that whole thing with humour, I don't know how healthy that is, but I'll do it anyway, I guess.
I guess there's that sense of a rite of passage, isn't there? That things are passed down through family, and sort of, I guess I don't know, but maybe there's that sense of an expectation that, you know, you'll grow up in this land and then suddenly that land will be yours. And obviously you're kind of subverting that rite of passage as well. And you're like, I want to do my own thing. I'm going to take my own path. So yeah, I can definitely agree that, yeah, there is a sort of sense of awkwardness there as well.
Yeah.
Does anyone else have any other questions, Isaiah?
No, not on Instagram, no.
Does anyone want to come online here? And Torran, do you want to?
Yeah, I don't have like a question, but more of a thought. When looking at your work, I kind of get this feeling of, I'm not sure if you've experienced this, if you sort of move away from your hometown, and then when you go back, like everything just feels much smaller. And I've thought about this quite a lot, because like when you're at home, you're like somewhere that you've actually like physically grown up. Like A to B seems much further when you're smaller, but then when you revisit, that same A to B feels much shorter, because like you've physically grown up. So then the landscape itself, like in proportion, feels much smaller. And I sort of feel like that sort of notion makes it quite hard to like go away and then come back to, say, like this farm landscape and feel like you're almost kind of like stuck there, because it feels so small now that you've like gone away and come back.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think definitely there's bike rides that I used to do when I was really small that I've done more recently, and I've gone out thinking that it's going to be really long, and then I've got to the end and thought, oh Jesus Christ. But yeah, like definitely. That's really interesting. Now I'm thinking about it, I can't really say anything. Sorry. I can
It's
either
alright.
speak or think. It's not two at the same time. Yeah. Yeah, that's really interesting. I think it's like that picture shows it off really, I guess. That's me when I was small.
Yeah,
That tree looks tiny from far away.
Mm,
You go up to it and it's actually quite big.
mm.
I didn't realise how big it was until I literally took this picture. So yeah, I think it is weird coming back to somewhere that you grew up and everything seems huge, and then you come back to it and it's actually really not that huge at all.
Yeah, and I guess also like with that picture of you stood on top of the tractor, it's like that is something that is quite big, and that's a man-made thing that feels quite big, and then you're stood on it, and like kind of relating to Torran's comment, it's like that is something that probably felt really, really big when you were growing up, but now you've come back, it's almost like I'm bigger than it, and
Yeah,
I'm grown out of this kind of world, and yeah, it's a really nice sort of comment, really.
that relates it back to the title. There we go. Perfect. Done it for me. I've been trying to figure out how to relate it to the title. Perfect. Cheers, man.
There you go.
Ideal. Cool.
Does anyone else have any other comments or questions for Toby? You can either come online just randomly or put something in the chat or bother Isaiah.
I had something I was kind of, mine's more of a comment as well, which is that I just happened to know actually that Alex Morant from Monday, it comes from quite a similar background of a farming family, where I've heard him mention that it was a conversation he had to have, that he didn't want to continue the family's like farming heritage. And it's kind of interesting that, like, I guess Toby, you've done it pretty consciously, but Alex maybe less so, where you're both like placing yourselves in that landscape, like in your artwork, and I suppose coincidentally, I'm not trying to compare you, but like coincidentally, you both like come to a really rural university as well. I thought it was really cool to hear you speak about that, Toby. And I've obviously only seen those, like, I haven't seen the context of those pictures before, so definitely recontextualize the way that I can like look at them now going forward. Yeah,
that's interesting to me though. So what did you think they were before though?
Well, I don't know. I could see that they were performative, but I suppose I didn't know that they were taken in your kind of like hometown or like home territory. So I'm not sure I'd kind of articulated like exactly what I thought about them. They certainly were like quite like playful. I could tell that, like experimental, playful, performative. But to now kind of see them through that lens of like you relating to home, I think is really cool. It also made me think a little bit of a film called God's Own Country. Have you seen that?
No, I'll write it down.
Which is like the protagonist in that is a farmer in whichever county in the UK people call God's Own Country. Is it Yorkshire?
I'm not sure.
I think it's Yorkshire, and it's just like a really I don't know, quite poetic like meditation on the like solitude and loneliness that he feels as a farmer, kind of like out in the British landscape, which, like, Isaiah was saying, has been depicted as this like stunning, sublime, like the place where the sun never sets. But I guess the reality is that most of the time it can be this really bitter and unforgiving sort of open space. So really cool.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for that, Jasper, and thank you, Toby, for sharing your current work. It was lovely to talk about it and just chat about it as well. I think we'll move on to Torran now, if that's okay. But obviously, do stay and have a chat with Torran and see what that really. But yeah, over to Torran. I'm passing over the baton.
So you have to let me know if this works.
Ooh.
Okay, so so the project that I'm working on at the moment all sort of stemmed from the passing away of my great grand auntie, who I called Auntie Colleen, and that's probably how I'll just naturally speak about her. But I in the like chaos of having a pandemic funeral ended up like designing the order of service, which like this is just a little clip from, and that sort of got me thinking about like family, memory, and loss, and I sort of took this forward into this project. I inherited lots of their prints, as you can see here, from when they were sort of travel around. And then I sort of started, this is like a very early piece that I made, which sort of I felt was like the direction I wanted to take this project. As you can sort of see here, like they'd always take pictures of each other and sort of piecing that together to make one image. And then as well as all of these prints, there were negatives, and this sort of some of the ephemeral kind of packaging which they're all in, which I think is like equally beautiful as like the pictures, because it's just such a different time. And then these are some of the negatives I've started to work with, and I love the way that they like would always take a picture of each other and then swap, like you can see in the top sort of strip of negatives. And although I thought this was like quite fun and playful, I kind of didn't want to just present their images, so I wanted to like take it a step forward. So yeah, these are just some of the more sort of obscure formats I've come across. And then I started to double expose negatives. This one obviously is both negatives that they've taken, but then I sort of take this idea forward, and this is the first negative that like I used my own image. It's kind of hard to see in this one. Like in the center of there's like a man, sort of behind the three strips there's like flowers as well, and then it's got me thinking to like how I could use my images mixed with these sort of family archive images. And then this is one of them. So this is a picture, like say from the 70s, 80s, mixed with a picture taken like a few years ago. And this one, I think, is they're both images are like at a birthday party, like my birthday party, and then obviously someone else's birthday party. You kind of see the cake right in the middle. Yeah, I think I'll just sort of present them first, and then we can sort of have a discussion later, I think.
Oh.
And yeah, in sort of the context of COVID, seeing like large group photos and things was kind of like jarring. So I sort of started to mix, like, as you can see here, group photos that like I've taken, as well as group photos that I've come across. And yeah, this is sort of a slightly experimental piece when I lost a test strip in the dark room. And then this kind of leads me on to sort of talking about technologies, I guess, which like in the next slide, I have like the last time that Auntie Connie, like last time she wrote to me. And then on the right is like a series of screenshots that I took, and then also my mum took whilst she was there with her, of me, and sort of show like both perspectives of this conversation. which I didn't really realise that she was taking until like afterwards when she like sent them through, which is really sweet. Oh, and then I forgot to mention, this is kind of put on at the end, but I also received this 16mm home movie camera, and really luckily yesterday I received the footage back from the lab, so I can show that now.
Oh wow, that's exciting.
Such good timing. Yeah, it's 3 minutes and it's silent, so I might just
play it all if you like.
Yeah.
You
Sort
play
of just the
background
like yeah, I think I'll play the whole thing. This is the inside of the lens cap. Don't worry, it hasn't frozen.
Ooh. Wow.
Should I come back to Teams, or should I carry on scrolling through?
Yeah, it'd be nice if you could keep, I think, showing the imagery. But it's so nice to see that film finally on motion picture. I'm sure it's lovely for you, and I'm sure the experience of watching that for the first time was so exciting. Yeah. But yeah, I guess we can start with the film and that kind of that personal relationship with the land that we sort of spoke about with Toby. And I quite liked. So did you make a mistake where you didn't take the lens cap off, or?
Yeah, that sort of section of just like black footage was just the inside of the lens cap. But I strangely quite like it. It's kind of like a pause in the film.
Yeah, and it's nice to have that relationship with it. Was it a mistake or was it intentional?
It was a mistake, yeah.
Yeah, with like, because obviously like there's that sense of like a home film because of the way you're talking about the camera and the imagery that's also surrounding it of family and friends. And so it's nice to have that little mistake where it's like, oh dear. And then it's sort of, it's almost, it's permanent in that film, isn't it? And yeah, as you say, there's that sort of pause, that sort of moment where, you know, you can kind of be like, wait, what's happening? But also there's that moment for reflection, isn't there? I just really liked that relationship there was with the landscape, and maybe we want to talk a bit more about the process of making the film, kind of what you filmed and shot and so on.
So obviously, like the film was made like in lockdown, so like my process was just kind of going out every day and walking with my camera and tripod and trying to sort of find something which would like catch my interest, and then I'd like sort of take like 10 seconds of footage and then carry on. Usually only capturing like 1 or 2 clips on a walk, but it sort of gave me like in lockdown and going out for walks and everything, super beneficial.
Again, it's that sort of sense of like the ritual and in walking through that landscape. We also spoke about with Toby and that sort of sense of a process of, again, with sort of when you're also shooting film, I feel like there is that sort of ritual where you're like, I'm going to shoot, you know, this amount of time or this for this long, and then move on. And that sort of repetition that we see throughout the film, where there's lots of different locations, but it doesn't feel like chaotic. It doesn't feel like there's so much going on. There's sort of beautiful sort of stillness throughout it. And again, I think also that kind of, I mean, English and then Cornish landscape that we see, and then you constantly like within that landscape, whether that's through presence or whether obviously you are in it physically at times. I think it'd just be, like what were the like methods behind some of the locations you shot, and I guess what also are you trying to articulate with the film? If you know or don't know, it'd just be nice to sort of hear you talk about it.
I think the process of like the locations was kind of just nice walks I'd like to go on in lockdown, and then experiencing the land, and sort of having a break from looking at your screen all the time, by sort of venturing out into these beautiful spots. And then with the film, I suppose I'm sort of mainly exploring loss, not only like of loved ones, but in terms of like lockdown and everything, sort of a whole way of life that we've lost in terms of social interactions and gatherings and community. And then sort of using, like you said, like the stillness in the film, as sort of a meditation on that. It's like a meditation for me to create and for the viewer to experience. Like it works both ways.
Yeah, I completely agree. And it's interesting to think of like, you know, loss on a whole, the loss of your great aunt, and then like the pandemic and the kind of loss of the way of our life, and also so many lives as well. And then it's kind of weird, you have that kind of juxtaposition of, it's like we move further and further into the digital. I mean, this is all online. This is the way we're meeting at the moment and communicating and so on. There's that kind of you looking back and looking at the archive as well, and also making a film on something that is, I mean, not necessarily like going out of fashion. I suppose it's coming more and more into fashion, but it's something that is becoming quite lost, something that we don't use as much anymore. And it's that kind of nostalgia of looking back as well, I think, which is really nice. And I guess that physicality in space, it's just, it's very nice to sort of see that kind of, in a way, moving back, but obviously it's always rooted in the present as well.
Definitely.
Yeah, I guess and I guess also it'd be nice to hear sort of like about like the film and how that kind of positions itself within the imagery that's around it, and kind of how you maybe envisage this to be shown together, or how they might converse with each other.
Yeah, obviously it's sort of on a face value, this like black and white film, and then you have these like color prints, or these sort of prints that I've made that are sort of technically imperfect with color and things. They don't sort of match together sort of visually, but because I sort of inherited the camera from my family, I feel like again, that sort of using that slower process of shooting that film camera also kind of like slowed me down and like helped with like loss. Sort of diving into that process, doing like loads of research about it, and sort of hoping and praying that I would even get anything back from it, and luckily I did. It was quite a nice process of like shooting it, but then also like the whole from start to finish.
Yeah, and that's sort of, I mean, those imperfections are sort of so perfect for the archive, and kind of looking at, you know, family life and human life as well, because there are obviously so many imperfections, sort of touching on cliche there as well. But I mean, I guess it's cliche for a reason, isn't it?
Yeah.
And also, again, like in the film, yeah, that kind of waiting to see something, waiting for it to reveal itself. This, I think, just very experimental and exploratory process that you have. Yeah, and just thinking about the merging of imagery. Really also like, I mean, we sort of touched upon it, and a few people have touched upon it in the chat as well, that this very clear sort of mixing the past and the present. And I guess just like, what does that mean to you, like bringing these two, this sort of time together and these people together? Like, yeah, I guess what does that mean to see them side by side, these people that mean completely maybe different things to you, but suddenly they're almost existing at the same time in an image at one point?
Yeah, like this image, for example, my image is like the one in the center, and then to the left and right are the archive images. And sort of bringing these together, I suppose, obviously, like when I was searching through like my negatives and the archive negatives, I sort of found these similarities of like people dancing or people swimming, that although like taken from completely different like time periods, like just as people we have these similarities of things we do, such as like dancing, or is it this way or that way, or like meeting up in big groups, or like celebrating like a birthday, or like big events, is like something that we've all like lost. And then sort of linking in with the loss of loved ones that I'm sure like I've experienced, and I'm sure other people have experienced recently. I sort of feel like it all kind of comes together in this project, and it's sort of one of those things I kind of struggle to articulate with words, but I feel like through these different kind of approaches, I'm like sort of like chipping away at it, like trying to figure out what I'm saying.
Yeah, there's definitely a very strong visual language of sort of loss and a sense of melancholy, but then there's also a sense of like living there, and something almost being given new life over and over again through this mixing and through this merging. I mean, I'm sure a lot of the archive are things and memories that maybe you haven't experienced and you've never been at, and you've never really known, mixed with things that you've taken and you've experienced and you've been at, and it's sort of merging their memories and these moments with things that you've lived, and it's giving them new life and new meaning, while also retaining their own meaning as well, isn't it? Yeah, and I just, there's a real sense of sort of beauty and sort of permanence in memory as well, I think too. It's sort of making the intangible tangible as well. Letting you kind of grasp it. And I think what's also really nice that we haven't actually touched upon yet is, you've just moved on to it, that's perfect, is that kind of weird kind of in between of, obviously this is, I'm sure your process is very physical, and you could obviously talk to us more about that, but where you've got these images of merging film, merging negatives, and obviously your film is shot on motion picture film, and then you've got this kind of little strand, this thing that is very digital, kind of merging with something physical as well. And here, just sort of meeting in between, aren't we, of something very physical and very, very digital and intangible, isn't it?
Definitely. I think also I haven't sort of delved into it yet, but I also have a small collection of like my auntie and uncles. They're digital photos. They're so different in terms of what they are. Like, I've been like looking through them, and it's like pictures of them like renovating their kitchen, or just like pictures of like a plug socket and it's like stripped wall. It's like really, really mundane in like quite a beautiful way, but it's so different to like the types of pictures that they take on film of like people and like going places to meet people and creating memories. I think because it is obviously like on film, you do have this kind of like, there's this like placed importance on it, compared to like maybe on digital, that's how you'd document your kitchen renovations. But I sort of love that push and pull between both, sort of like in this print, which kind of came about slightly as an accident as I lost this test strip. And anyone who's been in the color darkroom, you'll know how dark it is. Sort of like searching for this print on the floor from the light of my phone, or like the very lowest brightness, and then obviously just held my phone up to the print before developing it. I think it's like sort of perfect kind of image. I think it kind of speaks about my project in terms of like the past and the present and this relationship between them, without sort of using any like archival images or anything. I think I like this image quite a lot, even though it was such a spur of the moment creation.
Yeah, I really like it too, and I think it's quite different to a lot of the imagery shown, other than the sort of contact sheets. But there's this kind of really weird ghostly presence of the digital, and it's kind of there. And it's like, I mean, obviously because you said it's a phone, like we can all recognize that it is, but it definitely feels something that is like manufactured and made. And it's just sort of appearing, and it feels very alien. I feel like I can see a little face, and it's a little bit scary. And then also that redness and that color as well. But it's really nice to just sort of have that juxtaposition and that relationship where you are also communicating among the digital, and I guess also where you're talking about the digital archive too, that you're sort of exploring, going through. Then with the film, it's sort of that preservation of those frames, and every photograph matters. And I guess also like with our generation too, growing up with digital, I don't know if anyone else does this, but whenever I shoot a roll of film, you know, I don't always shoot right to the end, and there'll be like 5 pictures left. And I mean, I tell everyone about this, but I seriously just shoot windows and curtains. So I must have hundreds of pictures of windows and curtains that I've just shot to finish a roll of film. And I wonder if that, you know, in the archive you also find that, or whether that's just sort of an impatience that we've sort of grown up with because we've sort of experienced the digital.
Yeah, I think I don't think I've sort of realised that in the archive, because I think like back in the day, obviously, like you could only shoot film. So I think people were like so excited that they would probably just shoot a whole roll of film like whilst traveling, without really thinking about like each frame as maybe like preciously as we do. Because we have so many options now, we can sort of think differently, but if this was like the only way, like, this is how you make a picture, maybe you wouldn't have that sort of thought.
I guess that less, while sort of you're preserving those memories, there's that less kind of like every image matters, but then I guess also that kind of, there's more of an excitement in every frame from what you're saying, rather than, you know, Maddie shooting windows that she's never going to use, even though she just wants to shoot the film, you know, and finish it.
When I'm at home, I always end up taking like portraits of my dog for like those last like 2 or 3 frames. So I've already got, again, like loads of pictures of my dog at home, just like either in the garden or in his bed.
Yeah, and it's interesting when you think like with the digital, obviously, like we've all grown up with it, and my family are absolutely hilarious sometimes when I shoot film, and we like, you know, you have that classic like portrait at home, you know, over a birthday or Christmas, and I guarantee someone will ask, can I see it? And then they'll go, oh wait, I can't see it. And there's that kind of weird kind of moment where, you know, we're so used to seeing the images immediately, and then suddenly you can't. And yeah, I think we've spoken about this briefly too, but the shooting of your motion picture film, it's like at the end, like, I guess, what was the experience of it generally, but also like, did you find that it was quite impatient, and that you were quite impatient even?
I might just put it on again whilst we carry on talking. But so I shot this obviously, and then shot it over sort of a period of weeks, and then had to send it off to be developed and everything. But I feel like as we're probably quite used to that process, so I wasn't sort of, I was excited and a bit nervous that obviously it wouldn't turn out. But I was also shooting a digital version, just like for crits and tutorials, really, to show my ideas of like a mock-up, almost like a sketch of the film that I was making. Because of this process where you don't see it for ages, it's kind of hard to tell your tutors like, oh, this is what I've been up to, like just trust me. It's a bit harder.
Yeah, almost talking about a film that doesn't quite exist yet, aren't you?
Yeah.
But it's amazing how, I mean, obviously, like, I know what it looked like on digital, but how different this looks, and it does look like some sort of film that you sort of picked up out of your archive, although at times you're in it, and you played it and you're screening it, and it feels like a part of an archive, which is so nice. I guess that's kind of that format that makes it feel like that as well. I think while we're also here and sort of looking at this film, it'd be great if anyone else had any other comments or questions they'd like to ask Torran, if they'd like to come online, or if there's any questions in the chat or on Instagram. Isaiah can deliver them as per.
Hi.
Yeah.
Hi, it's Malcolm. Yeah, I'm kind of using someone else's laptop, so don't get confused.
Hi, Malcolm.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to say, like, I think one of my favorite images of yours is the one with Jack in it. Yeah. The reason why is because like I really like the way how you're working like so physically. Is that image kind of like just like 2 or 3 like negatives laid over like physically?
Yeah. So it's obviously 35mm, but it's in a six neg holder, so I can have that sort of overscan, sort of like having that extra space, and then it's just 2 negatives on top of each other, and like with those ones I've been like spending a lot of time kind of like moving them very slightly to make that sort of perfect spacing in between frames, like putting a frame in between the spaces. And we've talked about like the Japanese philosophy of negative space. And that's something that I've sort of been thinking about in the film as well as in the prints as well. We're trying to work with space. Like, I feel like stillness and space like go hand in hand together, especially in the project.
Yeah, because I was thinking like what I really love about like negatives is like it's like the only kind of like tangible thing that actually existed within that time frame. Like if it's digital, you can't really hold it. But so I thought it was quite like it was really, really poetic how you kind of like use that physicality, that tangibleness, and kind of like allow those two negatives to touch each other. Almost bringing the past and present like physically like together. And I thought it was like such a beautiful moment when I saw it. I was like, oh, and then it was amazing as well because like the things the things that you captured within the pictures were touching as well. As in like, you know, like Jack and Esme like holding each other, your two I don't know if there's like grandparents or something, they were kind of like holding each other. And I thought like that whole image really speaks like a lot within itself. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Especially sort of as we've sort of having to like with social distancing, having lost that kind of connection.
Exactly.
I feel like I'm like trying to recreate that connection within the image.
Wow, lovely. Yeah. I also just want to say like there was something quite comical about your video. I was hoping for some like title cards to come in between, like some like Charlie Chaplin movie or something. But yeah,
it's
man,
a
great
silent
image.
film as well, isn't it? You're kind of expecting sound and it never quite comes.
Yeah.
It's a reinforcing stillness.
If you spit this one up, it will look a bit like Charlie Chaplin. Yeah.
And I'm just pausing it here. Sort of whilst creating this image, I was like almost as well like creating almost like a document of this time. I was thinking like having this sort of very visual representation of social distancing. Like it's kind of bizarre to go for a walk with someone and like stand so far away from them, or like not like for me like I'm a very like huggy person. It feels really weird not to like, go up to someone and give them a big hug, and I feel like that's something I'm trying to almost capture in this, which can be reflected on later.
It's that human connection, that relationship, and that sort of emotion is also it is so pertinent to the archive as well. And also just sort of as you've been sort of talking, I've sort of just been thinking about just that physicality of the family album, and sort of again as the pandemic like pushes us further into digital, how you know I feel like Facebook and Instagram kind of becomes that space for a family album, or a space where we kind of broadcast our lives, but all of those memories and all those moments are just so easily like forgotten and like deleted and displaced, whereas in the family archive they're there. That's what they are, and maybe you could talk about that kind of disparity between those two things.
Yeah, definitely. And I've definitely had it where you sort of lose digital files. Or recently, like one of my hard drives like corrupted, and then I had to send it off to be like recovered. Very scary. Got everything back, but not a nice experience.
Yeah.
But like that with like physical thing, but I sort of I wouldn't have been able to make this without the physicality of these sort of prints and negatives, because they are like physically passed down.
It's just that relationship with the physical, isn't it? And things that have been so preserved and looked after, and as you sort of say, that kind of weird juxtaposition, whereas I feel like in the digital everything feels like infinite, it feels permanent, like it can never disappear because it's like everywhere. And yet like digital files are so fragile and easily lost and corrupted, and when you have like a negative is easily damaged or lost or print or whatever, but there's that kind of, with the family archive, there's that greater sense of preserving it and looking after it, isn't there?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I think like the like fragility of like the image as well also speaks to sort of, I think like its beauty in sort of like a wabi sabi kind of way.
Yeah, definitely that impermanence of life, and that kind of also Malcolm kind of touched upon it as well, where a lot of these images are sort of very similar things but at completely different times, and it shows that kind of cycle of human life, and that we constantly sort of have those moments and make those memories that are the same, whether that's at birthdays or there's always a picture when you go on holiday, or there's always pictures of people swimming of need, isn't there?
Definitely. And I think with group photos as well, whenever there's a meeting or a crossing of paths, someone's always like, "Oh, get a group photo." I find it's kind of a culture that will never fade out. So we'll always be doing.
Yeah, even in between all the random pictures of windows and plug sockets and stuff. There'll always be those images you kind of can't avoid in a way. I feel they will always be taken, because almost that we have to preserve it through photography. Yeah. Does anyone else have any comments or questions for Torran, Isaiah, Jasper, or anyone else here? They'd like to come online or so on.
Yeah, not really, but I think maybe a comment, but like the for the moving image piece, like the one where you're going on like a socially distant walk. I think from like an archive point of view, like especially like from Falmouth, it just feels like Falmouth has not like aged a single bit.
Yeah.
And I don't know, this piece looks so like timeless as well.
Yeah.
And
I think the black and white definitely helps with that.
Yeah.
And the camera only takes double perforated 16mm film. It's got like sprocket holes on both sides, which is like quite rare these days, because you can only really buy sort of new Super 16 like with one sprocket holes down the side. And you can only really buy black and white double perforated. So I sort of had to shoot black and white. I sort of like it because of its timeless quality, like you mentioned.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I don't know, I mean, like I put in a comment, it reminds me of like 60s like kitchen sink films, like British kitchen sink films. Those black and white, it's very like social realist, very gritty, real aesthetics kind of thing. But yeah, but are you planning to like overlay like any like sound or like
I'm not sure, to be honest. I think I do want some background sound, because it's quite off-putting just it being completely silent. I was thinking to like record the camera maybe, making its noise, because although it's silent, the camera itself is still very loud and mechanical. But I'd also like to project it. Being sort of a transparency film, I could project it, but it's sort of a case of finding the projector and everything. So that's something to explore.
Oh.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to sort of like, how would you show this? And I think projection, again, that archive and that kind of whole experience of projecting motion picture film, sort of the sound of the projector as well. It's like that kind of speaks for itself, that kind of ticking.
Yeah.
Ticking through each frame, it's like ticking through time and so on, and memory and an archive, all the things that sort of come together here.
Cool.
Yeah. Does anyone else have any more questions or comments, Isaiah or anyone else here that would like to come online?
I was just thinking, like, I've obviously like been speaking to you, Torran, as you've been making this, and I already knew that you were kind of like working on the theme of family archives and that kind of quite personal element of it. But it's cool to see it, like, to see this quite diverse array of stuff you have here now. And for me, there's like alongside your family archive theme, there's like a more global thing of time going on, which I find quite kind of poignant, where, as people have said, you're like obviously putting past and present alongside each other. And yeah, I find it pretty thought-provoking actually, and makes me think of like, you know, what like the equivalent time span as you're working on in the past there, you know, from now to the future, and what that will look like. And it's like, and it's also for me, I was just wondering if like, you know, if time had a physical form, it's almost like this is the closest you can get to showing that.
Definitely.
It's that journey of the physical film, isn't it? Is it like journeys throughout time and sort of space and visuals as well? And I guess also that silence as well, like there's that sort of silent thing about time as well, although like it ticks away through clocks and so on. That only sort of human attribution to it, isn't it?
Yeah.
Quite a silent movement in itself. Does anyone else have any other comments? That was lovely, thank you, Jasper.
Maybe the annoying question, but like, how do you plan to exhibit this?
I think
And the work, you know.
in sort of a exhibition context, I would sort of like to have the film like projected in like a sort of blacked out kind of dark, quite cozy room. And then I think having sort of like having sort of things like this, like parts, like physical parts of the archive that aren't as necessarily photographic but more sort of tangible and ephemeral, having these sort of in like display cases, sort of like archival, like the ones you have to kind of like look into, I mean, like with like protective glass. I think having these is sort of quite important in terms of like how the project came about, as well as having sort of the double exposed prints, sort of probably just on the wall, and then sort of just having a mix, I think helps, sort of explore the mix of things I'm exploring.
Yeah, for sure. Like even the packaging that you showed, it was like, I mean, you don't get that anymore now, isn't it? Like,
yeah,
and like the packaging as well. Like I've seen some of them, they're from like Malaysia, some of them destination unknown, but you know, it kind of gives, you know, this whole the journey of the archive, I don't know, it's like kind of like more solidified by, you know, such packaging, you know, signaling
definitely.
like where it's like geography, you know, where it's been, and yeah, no,
and obviously like I have like these sort of little photo albums, I'm not sure you can see, like these prints that kind of like flip out, and obviously it's not very COVID safe, but like in an exhibition I sort of want people to kind of be able to touch this and like flick through whilst they're in these sort of protective sleeves, because again, going back to that sort of physicality of the photograph.
Yeah. Well, I guess you could wear gloves.
Yeah.
Yeah. I also absolutely love the little tagline that's on the far right packet, which is "Spread a little happiness." There's sort of a kind of comedy in that kind of tagline, and also just the way it kind of brings you back to the work you're kind of exploring and making as well. That, you know, there is that sense of spreading a little happiness through archive and through those memories and sharing those as well, but also there's juxtaposed with that melancholy as well of that loss and that kind of things being gone. And I guess also that kind of process of looking through an archive, there's that happiness, and yet there's a sort of melancholy there as well, isn't there?
Yeah, maybe just like a last question, but like how does this disc work? So is it like, do you put a disc into like a projector and it just like projects images?
I actually have no idea how the disc film kind of works.
Maybe you put it in a CD drive. I'm just kidding.
I think the camera kind of, obviously it's a very specific camera, and I think it kind of works like a revolver.
Okay.
But I think you just kind of print from it. I don't really know how you'd put that in an enlarger, or maybe there's some sort of special disc negative enlarger holder, something. I don't know. It's such like an alien idea.
Yeah, it is. Maybe that was like the most like innovative like technology back then as well.
Yeah.
But it's certainly like so interesting to look back, like, I don't know, 40 years onwards from this.
Yeah.
It almost looks like straight out of like a Stanley Kubrick like movie or some spaceship in space or something.
One day we'll sort of look back on now and think it's ridiculous. So having like one camera lens on your phone, and we'll have like the back of your phone will just be like completely camera lenses.
Yeah, probably. It's a nice thing to pick up as well, because like throughout the project, there's lots of these different formats, and it's just also that way that technology has progressed and changed throughout time. And so from this to sort of the screenshot of FaceTime, that kind of really stark kind of juxtaposition between those two. It's nice to see that kind of develop over time, that kind of clear sort of progression, I guess, of humanity and the way we record our lives and our memories as well. Does anyone else have any final comments or questions on Instagram or here that they'd like to chime in on for Torran?
Well, and this as well, it represents kind of like time as well, isn't it? It's not something that has an end and a beginning. It's something circular.
A cycle.
Yeah, it's a cycle. And yeah, I don't think there's anything else on Instagram. So I think, yeah.
Okay, cool. So if there's no more comments here, then I think we'll wrap up now. But it's been so lovely talking to Toby and Torran about their work. Thank you so much